Okay, so identifying transformations, Unit 6, Day 1. So we've already gone through the whole list of our parent functions, and we had so much fun doing it. We didn't. But now we're going to get into like actually identifying transformations and what's happening to these graphs, okay? So given each function, identify both the parent function and the transformations from the parent function. So here, our parent function is x cubed, which is that graph right there. Now that minus 4 is going to move this graph down 4. So that blue one, that's what happened to the graph, and then that transformation there is just down 4. Okay? Let's go to the next one. So here, my parent function is the square root of x, which is that right there. And then I'm just going to start my transformations from left to right. That makes the most sense to me. That's how we read. That's how we're going to do all of this. Okay? So let's start with the 2. So that 2 vertically stretches this graph by 2. So it makes it go up a little bit more. Okay? Then that negative inside reflects it across the y-axis because it's inside. Remember, if it was outside, it would have reflected across the x-axis. Since it's inside, it reflects across the y-axis. And then that minus 1 moves it right 1. So the transformations here, vertically stretched by 2, reflected across the y-axis, right 1. Okay? Let's look at this next one. Our parent function here is x squared, which is just that U-shaped graph right there. Then we're going to start our transformations left to right. So the negative is going to reflect it across the x-axis because it's on the outside. The 1/4 is on the inside, and it's, remember in our notes, it's 1 over b. So since that's 1/4 inside, we're going to horizontally stretch it by 4. So you always flip that, and that's what you're stretching it by. Okay, if that's confusing, we'll talk about it more in class. And then the plus 6 is going to move this up 6. Okay? Let's look at this next one. This one is the absolute value function. And again, we're just going to start furthest left. So that 3 in there, it's inside, and that's going to horizontally compress it by 1/3. Okay, because you have to flip it. That's really 3 over 1, so we're just going to flip it. It's 1 over 3. That plus 5 moves it left 5. Minus 2, down 2. And there's our graph. Okay, this next one. So the parent function here is 1 over x. Okay? So first, that negative reflects it across the y-axis, or the x-axis, sorry. So, because it's on the outside, reflects it across the x-axis. That 4 vertically compresses it by 1/4, because really, you can rewrite this as negative 1/4 times 1 over x. So that 1/4 is on the outside, and that's going to vertically compress it by 1/4. Okay, and then the plus 3 moves it up 3. Cool? This next one, so the parent function here is the cube root. And it's just that little weird shape right there. And then we're going to start left to right. So the negative reflects it across the x-axis. The 4 vertically stretches it by 4, so now it's all big. That plus 1 moves it left 1. That plus 2 moves it up 2. So this reflected across the x-axis, vertically stretched by 4, left 1, up 2. Okay? This one is the step function. So that's that weird one that just steps all the way up. So x over 2, so that's going to horizontally stretch it by 2. Because again, we can rewrite this as 1/2 and then x minus 5. Okay, so that's 1/2, and we're just going to flip that, and so it's 2. And then the minus 5 moves it right 5. Minus 1 moves it down 1. And there we are. Okay? Now let's go to this one. This is the absolute value function again. That negative in the inside reflects it across the y-axis. But notice that didn't even really change anything for our graph because it's the absolute value, so that's really not going to change anything. That 1/3 is going to horizontally stretch it by 3. Flip it. Minus 4 is going to move it right 3. Plus 7 is going to move it up 7. Okay. Now this is the cubic function. So this is f of x equals x cubed. So the negative flips it over the x-axis. The 3/2 vertically stretches it by 3/2. Plus 3 moves it left 3. Minus 8 moves it down 8. Okay? Okay, now these ones are a little bit different. We have to write the equations given a graph, and then they're going to tell us what to do with it, okay? So our parent function here, that's the absolute value graph. So that's f of x equals the absolute value of x. If we're going to translate this right to units, that's inside, and it's the opposite of what we think. So that's going to be absolute value of x minus 2. So that moved it right to. And then we're going to reflect it across the x-axis and translate it up 5 units. So we're going to go back to our parent function, reflect it across the x-axis, translate it 5 units up. So that negative on the outside reflects it across the y-axis. The plus 5 translates it up 5. Okay. This one is f of x equals 1 over x. So we need to move this down 7 and left 3. So that's going to be 1 over x plus 3, and then the minus 7. So it's plus 3 because it's opposite of what we think, and then minus 7, move it down 7. Okay? This next one, horizontally stretch by a factor of 3 and translate 2 units. So if we're stretching horizontally by a factor of 3, we need to flip that. So this is going to be 1 over 3, and then we're going to translate it right 2 units. So it would be x minus 2. Okay? Here, my parent function, this is a step function, so it's the brackets of x. This is vertically stretched by a factor of 4 and translated up 1 unit. So that's going to be f of x equals 4 bracket x plus 1. Okay, now vertically compressed by a factor of 1/3 and translates left 2 units. That's going to be 1/3 and then x plus 2. It's opposite of what we think. Okay? Now this one using the graph, blah, blah, blah. This one is the cubic or the cube root function. Now we need to reflect this across the y-axis and translate 4 units right. Since it's the y-axis, it's inside. So that's going to be the cube root of negative and then x minus 4, because it's the opposite of whatever you think. Now if we're vertically compressing by a factor of 1/2 and translating down 5 units. It's vertical, so we have to flip that fraction. So that's going to be the cube root of 2 times x and then minus 5 to move down 5. Cool? Okay, let's look at these two. Whoops. So if the function, that was my chair, anyways, but if the function f of x equals 2x minus 5 cubed plus 3 is reflected across the y-axis, translated right 6 units and down 2 units, we have to write the equation for this new function. So let's start with reflecting this across the y-axis. So that's going to become a negative right there. Except I think I did that wrong. Because the y-axis, you have to have that on the inside. We're going to come back to this. Skip this right now. You could figure it out. How about you guys figure this one out? I think that negative needs to be on the inside. Figure this one out. We'll talk about it in class. Okay? But let's, actually for both of these, yeah, sorry. I want you to try and do them. Those are the answers, maybe. Sorry, it's been the longest day. So skip E and F, actually, don't try and do them. We're going to go over these ones in class and just take the quiz. I will see you guys tomorrow. Sorry, my life's a mess. Just kidding, bye.